Okay, everyone, it's time to talk about my very favorite group, the dinosaurs. I hope you all are doing well and staying safe. If you need anything, please let me know. You should be working on your exam, okay? Did I mention you should be working on your exam? You should be working on your exam. There are 11 questions. Most of them are 10 points apiece. You don't have to write me a book, just write enough information to address the prompts. Read the questions carefully, and if you have questions, let me know, okay? But work on your exam. Now, dinosaurs back in the day had many adaptations that would make them very successful during the Jurassic time period. They had an erect gait. Remember, we talked about that last time due to the acetabulum. And there is another hypothesis, now this one's particularly interesting, that suggests they might have been warm-blooded. Okay, so remember, we are warm-blooded creatures. And when you're warm-blooded, that means that you regulate your body temperature to keep it constant. All right, so we're warm-blooded. Mammals are warm-blooded in general. Cold-blooded would be like my tortoises that are very unhappy and trapped inside right now, even though they're under a heat lamp. They cannot regulate their body temperature as well. And so we have to try and keep them warm and toasty over the winter so they do well, or they will potentially hibernate, and many tortoises do that as well, but they have their own strategies. So warm-blooded means you can regulate your body temperature, and the hypothesis suggests that dinosaurs might have been, and we'll talk about the evidence. The alternative is being cold-blooded like reptiles. So just to give you a point of reference here, we have this nice graph, okay? And so first thing we do when we see a graph is we don't panic. We look at the axes. All right, so body temperature is on the y-axis going from 0 up to 40 degrees C. Ambient temperature is on the x-axis going from 0 to 40 degrees C. And you can see that those critters that happen to be endotherms, homeothermic endotherms, means that they regulate their body temperature. Whereas those that are like lizards and snakes and so forth, they're cold-blooded, and so they are not able to regulate their temperature properly. And so their body temperature differs with the ambient temperature outside. So remember, all we have is the fossil record to go off of. Okay, but it does tell us a lot of information. And one bit of information that suggests that dinosaurs might be warm-blooded is the fact that their microscopic bone structure shows a high density of haversian canals. Okay, now haversian canals are found in mammals. Our bones are not, they have nerves running through them and they have blood running through them. They're very much alive, just like the rest of us. And that's why if you break a bone, it hurts like crazy. I don't know if you guys have ever broken bones. I've broken an ankle before in 4 places. I was wishing for death soon afterwards. So I can tell you it's quite painful. Well, the reason it hurts so much is you have nerves running through there. Okay, and so they're running through what is called the haversian canals. And according to the fossil record, the haversian canals in the dinosaur bones are very similar to those that are found in mammals. All right. Additionally, to the haversian canals, warm-blooded creatures grow much faster than cold-blooded ones, and this is reflected in their bones. Okay, so a crocodile will only grow about 1 foot per year. A young masosaur, hadrosaur hatchling would reach its full size in about 4 years, and that's basically a growth rate 5 times faster than a crocodile, which matches more along the lines with warm-blooded critters. Now, another potential line of evidence is the locations of where fossils are found. So fossils found very far north where you'd have to be able to regulate your body temperature to survive. So the climate wasn't as cold back then as it is now, but it was still definitely a problem. So finding fossils so far north suggests that whoever was living there should have been able to regulate their body temperature. Okay, and so for dinosaurs to have lived in such a hostile climate, they would have had to either migrate south for the winter, they would have to go into a state of hibernation, or they would have special adaptations to the colder, to the darker areas, because the sun doesn't stay elevated as high as we know at the poles. So once again, suggesting that potentially these guys were warm-blooded. Now, another potential line of evidence that suggests the dinosaurs were warm-blooded is the fact that their descendants, the birds, were warm-blooded. Okay, now there is a potential that this was an adaptation that came about later, but, it kind of depends, and a lot of the fossil records suggest that maybe these guys were more towards the warm-blooded, but this is yet another supportive line of evidence for that. Now, another interesting line of evidence that has been suggested that led people to believe dinosaurs might be warm-blooded is if you look at the speed and agility measured by the trace fossils or the tracks that they left behind. Okay, so now there was a method developed by McNeil Alexander who looked at an animal's speed and stride length and found that if you scale them, okay, there was a relationship. So stride length, there's a relationship between stride length and speed. All right, and so you can see the equation up at the very above. No, you don't have to memorize it or have to calculate it. For those of you that are curious, that's how it happens to be calculated. So if you look at the graph on the left, you can see that they've plotted out the camels, the humans, and the dogs, looking at the speed and the stride length. Okay, so if you alter the numbers just a bit and you look at the speed again, okay, and you look at the stride length, a little bit of a variation on that, you can look at the graph on the right and see where dogs happen to fit, elephants happen to fit, humans happen to fit, and so forth, okay? And so, looking at the relationship of dinosaurs, they happen to fit more with the warm-blooded, all right? So the average speed of today's mammals, walking speed is much higher than cold-blooded. And so using the footprints and the trace fossils, if you measure the speed based on the stride length of the dinosaurs, it suggested that they might also have been warm-blooded. Now, another potential line of evidence is to look at the predator-prey ratios based on the fossil record. Okay, so predator-prey ratio is not the same for warm-blooded as it is for cold-blooded. So cold-blooded reptiles, because they don't have to constantly measure their body temperature, they can actually exist on fewer prey. However, warm-blooded predators have to have a much larger quantity of food, about 10 times as much for an equal-sized cold-blooded predator. And if you look at the predator-prey ratios calculated based on the fossil record, okay, so it suggests that the dinosaurs would have actually needed a lot of food, okay? And so for Permian cold-blooded predators like the Dimetrodon, the ratio is about 20%, 1 to 5, 1 predator to 5 prey, okay? The T-Rex is almost exactly the same as the predator-prey ratio for a saber-toothed cat, about 3.5%, so it's 1 predator, 30 prey. And modern carnivores like lions in Africa have a ratio of about 1 predator to 100 prey. So this gives you an idea of, where the dinosaurs happen to sit. They seem to sit with the saber-toothed cats and other mammals of their time. Now, think back to when we talked about the fossil record, though. We know that there are limitations to the fossil record, and we know that it's not perfect, which might, make this a little bit tougher to really reach a conclusion, but we're looking at a whole bunch of evidence here, okay? And the predator-prey ratio does seem to suggest it falls in line with mammals. Another potential line of evidence is looking at the oxygen isotope measurements. Okay, so if you keep a stable body temperature, then the oxygen isotope measurements will have 1 ratio throughout the critter's life. However, if you don't maintain a stable body temperature, then the oxygen isotopes will look a different way. Okay, and you're not required to know the intricate details of this. They're just looking at the ratio of the 2 isotopes in the bones, okay? And what that ratio is depends on the body temperature. And so based on oxygen isotopes, it seems to suggest that the dinosaurs maintained a stable body temperature, which, again, the only critters that do that are those that are warm-blooded. Now, as with any line of science, there are challenges, and so there are potentially alternate explanations to what scientists have found so far. For example, haversian bone structure might be related to rapid growth rate, but maybe not regulating body temperature. And for the second line of evidence, maybe continental drift displaced the fossils further north. Okay, then the living ones were actually found. Another one, maybe warm-bloodedness was originated, okay, as a new derived trait. Predator-prey ratios are always very iffy because we know that the fossil record isn't complete. Oxygen isotopes, there could be alternate explanations for that too. Maybe groundwater contaminated the samples or something. And last but not least, maybe if dinosaurs were super, super large, they wouldn't have to worry about their body temperature so much, just based on physics, because there's this term called gigantothermy. Okay, giganto meaning large and thermy meaning temperature. Where as an animal gets larger, the body decreases, body area decreases relative to its body mass, so it becomes more efficient at maintaining body temperature. So that might explain the oxygen isotope ratios that they found. But again, you have to take it as a controversy, and there really is no, definitive conclusion so far. Now, the very last line of evidence that suggests dinosaurs may have been warm-blooded is the presence of respiratory turbinates. These are folded structures of bone or cartilage in the sinus cavities, okay? And so we have a smaller version of them. Dogs have an extended version of them, and what they do is they help and conserve water and heat loss. This is why when you breathe cold air in, your nose and your sinuses help to warm the air before it hits your body so it doesn't cause your body temperature to decrease. Okay? Some scientists have found what they believe to be a reconstructed dinosaur skull that suggests they have them. Others have found that they don't have them. Again, it's a controversy, but if they happen to exist, then it would give them one more characteristic that causes them to be like mammals, which, again, there seems to be some evidence for. Now remember, we classified a group of creatures to belong to the dinosaurs if they had an open acetabulum. Okay, so remember they had to have an open hip. And so the two major groups of dinosaurs that appeared by the late Triassic are the saurischians, which are the reptile-hipped, and the ornithischians, which are the bird-hipped. And so the bird-hipped name is actually a bit of an awkward one, and we'll talk about why. But what I want you to get from this is that there's two different groups of dinosaurs, the saurischians and the ornithischians, okay? The reptile-hipped and the bird-hipped. So let's look at these at a little more depth, okay? The saurischian versus the ornithischian hip. So you can see the ilium, the ischium, and the pubis and how they're shaped in the reptile hips. Okay, so the pubis is separated more from the ischium, whereas if you're comparing the ornithischians, okay, the pubis and the ischium line up correctly, or they line up close together. So these are the two different types of groups the two different types of dinosaurs and how they're actually separated. Okay, so the two main groups of the saurischian dinosaurs, there are the herbivores called the sauropods and the carnivores called the theropods. Okay, so all the theropods are carnivores and all the sauropods are herbivores. So let's take a look at our sauropods. Okay, so key distinguishing features of the sauropods are small heads, peg-like teeth, and elongated cervical vertebrae. They were quadrupeds. They'd become so large that they could no longer be bipedal, okay? And they tended to be browsers, all right? So all these guys were vegetarians. They were huge. They were really awesome looking and not carnivores. So during the Jurassic, these guys evolved into quadrupeds that were so big, they were almost gigantic. Okay, so they could be between 60 to 110 feet, 50 to 80 tons. They were the largest land animals to ever evolve, and because they were so big, that's why they moved to 4 limbs. Okay, so way back when they first came about, they were on 2 limbs, but eventually once they got to this size and they were, the large critters we know and love today, they were on 4 limbs. So early reconstructions show them as these ponderous swamp dwellers, but that really wasn't the case. So they walked on land using their long necks for browsing the tops of the trees found in the dry uplands. And they also migrated in socially organized herds. How cool is that? Okay, so they started to show some interesting behaviors, probably for protection against any of the carnivores that might come their way. You might be asking yourselves, how could sauropods eat and chew enough plant material to keep their large bodies growing with such small pig-like teeth and mouths? And I would say, aha, that is an excellent question. So the answer is that the mouth basically rakes in food, but then they also have a large gizzard that contains stones known as gastroliths that help grind up the plant material and help the dinosaurs get every last bit of energy out that they possibly can. Okay, let's talk about the carnivores. These guys are cool. The theropods are all carnivorous. They are saurischian dinosaurs. They remained bipedal. They ranged from animals 3 to 4 feet in length to gigantic specimens as long as 40 feet. They had grasping hands of 4 or fewer fingers on their forearms, which are relatively small. They retained the anatomical body plan of ancestral dinosaurs, and although some of them could still be the most highly advanced. And this is also the group that evolved into the living birds. Their heads were relatively large, their jaws were armed with sharp blade-like teeth, their hind legs were powerful, large muscular tail that would help them balance and offset the weight of the large head. The smallest forms probably ate insects. The larger forms, like the T-Rex, ate basically whatever they wanted to. There are 4 major groups of the theropods. There's the cerators, there's the carnosaurs, the ornithinids, and the neactosaurs. And those are the ones that are related to the birds. No, you don't have to know them to spell them or anything along those lines. Just realize there's those different types of groups. So what's cool about the dinosaurs is we know that they had other characteristics that birds share with them. So they nest, and they sometimes nest in colonies. You can see that there would be an evolutionary strategy to that, hoping that increase in numbers and so forth. So they definitely, if we were to go back in time, they would behave a lot like the birds that we know and love today. So the second group of dinosaurs, these are the bird hip, the ornithischians. Now, the birds do not fit in this group, okay? They are not among this group. That's why the name does not fit, okay? But what I want you to get out of this is this group were all herbivores, okay? They're the easiest to understand because their biology and ecology is very similar to maybe the elephant or the rhino or the hippopotamus. They all replaced their front teeth with beaks that had massive grinding molars. They still have not resolved the trees, the phylogenetic trees of these guys as far as who's really related to who. But we know they had the lethosaurs, which are the small herbivores, the therophores, those are the plated and armored ones, okay, like the stegosaurus and ankylosaurus. There's the sauropoda, okay, like the hadrosaurs. And then the marginocephala, those are like the horned dinosaurs and those cool guys. So lots of interesting critters in here. And then just like that, one of the most successful groups of critters would be gone in a short period at the end of the Cretaceous. So most likely, we talked about this before, it was a meteor impact. Probably some volcanic eruptions in there helped as well. Okay, but they distinguish one of the largest and most famous groups of critters ever to live in Earth's history.